Welcome back to Unpluggered. It has been a little while between drinks. Not a full episode today. As we get back into the swing of things, we are missing a couple of our regular hosts in Darren Parkin and Aaron Maguire. But in their place, I have Mitch Keating, editor at zerohanger.com. A bit of a draft guru. You've watched a lot of junior footy over the last couple of years. Mitch, welcome to the show.
Thanks, mate. Lovely. Happy to make my debut for Unpluggered. I'd almost say first-time listener. I've been a listener a little bit. I'm not a Saints man, but yeah, I've been a listener a little here and there. So, more than rapt to be on the show.
We do appreciate your support, mate. Mate, I wanted to, get your thoughts on the Saints draft plans and some of the players that we will and might be looking at over the next couple of days. As we record this, for about 48 hours from pick one on the first night of the two draft nights. Obviously, where we sit at the moment, St Kilda has pick 7 and 8, 7 based on their ladder position at the end of the season. And obviously, the club received pick 8 as compensation for Josh Battle leaving in free agency. Mitch, as someone who's watched a lot of footy and covers a lot of footy and has seen, everything over the last couple of years, where do you see the Saints and what they're, looking for heading into the 2024 draft?
Yeah, well, I think it's an exciting period, to say the least. The last two seasons under Ross have been up and down, but I think with a young core coming through, it's pretty exciting. And this is a good draft to add to that, particularly with a pair of top 10 picks. The focus from a Saints point of view, at least with pick 7, would be to add to that midfield. They got some experience through Jack McRae. Jack Carroll's a bit of an unknown quality, but what we can expect, I would say, in with one of those first two picks would be an extra midfielder, some extra depth. You've also got, over the last few picks, Mateus Philippou's midfield forward option, Mitch Owens midfield forward option, Marcus Windhager, that more defensive-minded on-baller. I think another midfielder to kind of complement those kind of names, plus your Steeles, your McRae's, and some other depth players, is certainly going to be an area of focus for the team with those early picks.
I think if you ask Saints fans what they want to see out of the draft, you'll get very mixed response. I mean, a lot of them will say, we want more midfielders, and this is a really a draft that is heavy with quality midfield, especially at the top end of the draft. We probably haven't seen one like this for a number of years in terms of how the top 10 plays out, let alone top 15 or top 20 in terms of who does what on draft night. But a couple of different options that the club could be looking at in terms of trading up or down. They could package up some picks to get up into the top 5 of the draft. They could also, slide down and try and get a couple of extra picks, in the 10 to 20 range or 10 to 25 range. How do you see, the options for the Saints moving forward?
Well, you've brought in Simon Dalrymple this year, and it's from the Swans, who, along with Kinnear Beatson, were pretty famous for just picking the best player available, just tried and trusted method of when they're on the clock, who's at the top of their list. Obviously, it's worked quite well for them, even outside of their academy benefits up in Sydney. So that certainly could be, taken. I think it definitely would be with your top 10 pick in this kind of draft, when the top tier and the level of play you're probably getting with the first dozen or so selections. I would probably steer away from focusing too much on list needs when you've got picks 7 and 8. In saying that, though, if there is an easy selection at pick 7, and then it starts, the Saints do see it opening up after with pick 8, splitting that selection would be one avenue, and that probably gives you an easier focus with a couple of picks late in the teens. GWS obviously one avenue you'd be able to pursue, Richmond another, but I don't think the Tigers would be moving back up necessarily. That could help. That would mean you have 3 first-round picks. You can kind of spread a little bit more than potentially taking 2 midfielders in one. So there's certainly options there. Obviously, your first-round pick's another one. Use 7 and 8, and then that first-round pick could be, again, a mid-teens, late-teens selection. Obviously, I wouldn't think that the Saints, well, they might, but their future first-round pick might not be a 15-plus selection. But I think with what for this year's draft compared to what you don't for next year's, using that first round selection might be a benefit as well. If there's a player still on the board that I guess isn't covered in those first two picks at 7 and 8.
There are a couple of players that are tied to the club that'll look to arrive at Moorabbin a little bit later on through the draft. One is Elwood Peckett. His dad is Justin Frankie Peckett. And then two academy kids in Adrian Cole and Lennox Hoffman, who we might get you to touch on just quickly a little bit later on. But let's get stuck into, I guess, some of those options with pick 7 and 8, if the club does go ahead with those two picks. There's been a number of those guys, mainly midfielders, that have been kind of spoken about as decent fits for St Kilda over the last month to 2 months. Why don't you start with, I guess, your ideal pick for St Kilda? If everything goes right and pick 7 is who they want, who do you think they want at pick 7?
Yeah, I think like a Sam Lawler, a Josh Smiley, a big body midfielder who can offer a bit of grunt explosiveness through the midfield. Lawler tied to Richmond's first selection is certainly going to make things difficult. Smiley as well, tied to Richmond's second selection of pick 6, is also could make things difficult. But Harvey Langford's another one there. The Saints at pick 7 are in probably that difficult spot where they're definitely just going to have to wait. I don't think there's going to be a clear picture. Obviously, what North Melbourne do with their selection at pick 2, do they trade back and potentially go as far back as only pick 6? Or, with their sights on Alex Tauru. So it's going to be interesting if they did trade out of pick 2, and then Richmond kind of get a double stab at it in pick 1 and 2, if you're assuming they're the other club in that deal. But that could benefit the Saints, I think, because that means you've got two midfielders who probably weren't in the Saints' reach taken off the board early. North Melbourne moved back a few spots, and Alex Tauru's at 6, and then you could have two decent midfielders sliding out of that top 6. So Josh Smiley, pardon me, big body midfielder from Eastern Rangers, is one who I've had picked up by the Saints at pick 7 in 2 mock drafts. So I think there's a good chance that he could be on the board. But add to that, Harvey Langford's another one who you'd love to have. Perfect scenario, yeah, Sam Lawler's probably another as well. I think if he somehow slides and isn't picked up by the Tigers or another club in those first 6 picks. So they're the 3. Sid Draper's another one, obviously a bit smaller than those names mentioned, but that's speedy, explosive, cunning midfielder that I think you guys would like as well. So they're probably the few names that I would have at the top in a best case scenario. But then, I think when you are talking mostly midfielders, that you're not going to find too many poor options where you're sitting. Even if those names are off the board, you still got a Jagger Smith to come through there and in those top few picks as well. So like I said, Saints at 7 are in kind of that waiting spot just to see how the first 6 unfold. And then it's kind of which name or 2 names are left over.
You mentioned Sam Lawler and Jagger Smith. I think in most mock drafts, those 2 guys are off the board by the time it gets to pick 7. So
yep.
You mentioned Josh Smiley, big-bodied, Eastern Rangers, ball winner, bit of grunt in there. Tell us a bit about Josh Smiley.
Well, he's the size of a key position player at 195 centimetres. So you're probably looking at that Patrick Cripps mould, but I wouldn't fret too much being concerned that, what might be considered already a bit of a slow midfield with Steele and Crouch the last couple of years. Adding Smiley to that, he does have a fair bit of run on him for a player of his size. So that is a nice kind of balance and a kind of a rare commodity to come through at his age, already that size and with a bit of run. And he does have some versatility to him as well. So you can play him a bit forward. You could play him a bit in defence, but I think if you best suited, he could be swapping in a rotation with Mateus Philippou or Mitch Owens if those are the 2 that are getting more runs through midfield next year. So when the Saints see a 195 centimetre midfielder coming through to their list, if that was the case, then I wouldn't be too cautious and too concerned straight away. There probably is more than what's just on paper, given he has proven to be quite a quick player for his size.
I think most clubs would want or would be pretty happy with a Patrick Cripps clone running through the middle. But someone like Smiley, who was spoken about as a potential pick 1, at least early in the season, but certainly throughout the year at different points, why do you think he's one of those ones that's kind of dropped down to the 7, 8, 10 range?
probably his national championships. So start of the year, probably the first month when games were getting underway, his performances for Eastern Rangers were prolific. Plenty of goals and plenty of touches and really taking over games as that match winner in that mold that the Saints would love to have. But when you kind of rise with expectations and go to the national level, for Vic Metro, he probably didn't hit the same heights, and that is probably always going to be a pretty main focus for AFL scouts. And when you've got the best across the country competing and not just in the kind of Victorian bubble that the Talent League is, there was probably a little knock there. But again, I think you would still be in that top 3-4 consideration, but it sounds more likely that maybe Richmond's second selection, whereas obviously we've mentioned it, Saints at 7 or 8.
Harvey Langford from the Mornington Peninsula, playing with the Dandenong Stingrays. Tell us a little bit about Harvey Langford.
So similar as well, pretty tall. I think he's about 191 centimetres, a bit more athletic, good overhead mark. If we're staying with the player comparisons, I guess it's a Marcus Bontempelli, who Saints fans won't want to hear too much about when you're talking about the draft. But look, this could be their time to kind of right that wrong a little bit and swoop on a player like Harvey. Took out the Lark medal this year as the National Championship's best player, and really rose with those expectations, contrasting with what maybe Smiley wasn't quite able to do. But yeah, just a high impact player. 25 touches. I think he kicked 20 plus goals for Dandenong this year, and can really leave his mark on the game as that game changer through midfield. Good size, good athleticism, and can go forward and use that kind of marking ability to be a forward threat as well.
Someone who has played a bit at Moorabbin, Sandringham Dragons, Murphy Reid. Tell us a bit about Murphy Reid.
Yeah, a pretty crafty midfielder, can play a bit forward as well. Just a good goal sense and just smart. I think clean hands around the contest. So a nice in and under player who can also get on the outside and probably damage a little bit with his disposal as well. And was another player who rose quite nicely at the national championships when you had good form for Sandringham and then just took it to a new level with Vic Metro, who went undefeated, took out the title, and Murphy Reid took out their MVP honours. So, he was a player that really had a great carnival. Yeah, a local product is something that the Saints will certainly consider, given that the kind of direction they've talked about with what they want to do with their list and building for the future under Ross. So, he'd certainly be in consideration at pick 7 or 8.
Any current or past comparisons for Murphy Reid?
I think he's an interesting one. I think like a smaller Pendles, if that kind of makes sense. Just composed inside, not too fussed and put off by the coalface, and I think he can kind of step around and outside of trouble quite easily, and then use his disposal to his best advantage. So that's probably it. Like I said, he's not quite the Pendles frame and size, but just that kind of composure and intelligence around the contest is probably the likeness I'd put there.
Perfect. A couple of interstaters and potentially some kids that Saints fans might not have seen a whole lot of, but would be in contention for those two picks at 7 and 8. Captain of South Australia, Sid Draper.
Yeah, probably one of my favourite prospects this year. Had a bit of an injury hit campaign at bookended with his, I think, a shin issue to start the season. Then he's had a bit of a chronic back issue that he says is nothing long term. It's something he's dealt with forever, but at the same time, nothing that will really be a major concern. Just something he was managing at the end of this year. But yeah, pacey, quick, explosive, smart, good leadership qualities. And had some great senior experience this year for South Adelaide, played 6 games, and I think he was averaging 20 plus touches, and one of the Panthers' best at the SANFL level, which many says that probably the best competition outside the AFL. So he looked at home, which kind of shows that he could be a pretty quick influence at AFL level next year, that you wouldn't be having to put too much time into him in the VFL before he needs to get that confidence up. He could be a pretty quick starter, and a real fitting addition with like a Marcus Windhager already in there, offering something on the defensive end, and Draper kind of bursting through the middle and giving something for the Saints forwards.
Beautiful. And Bo Allen in WA. What have you seen with Bo Allen?
Yeah, well, really grew his game this year as a midfielder. So he was part of the AFL Academy after a promising bottom age campaign for Peel Thunder in WA, and was more playing as like a third tall forward, just given he's got good size. I think he's 190 plus as well, and had a good leap on him. But WA ran him through the midfield this year and looks at home, just powerful, strong, and got a good brain on him, it looks like, just with his decision-making. Played for Peel Thunder, similar with Draper, solid state league experience as well. This year was part of Peel Thunder's premiership side in the Waffle. Can play on the wing, can play across the back line, obviously, and then inside midfield as well. So a bit more versatility in someone like Beau Allen. I guess with St Kilda's back line and maybe some of the shifting that's going on down there, that he could be a kind of a nice addition to mix with the back line early before making maybe a more mature progression into a midfielder.
Any comparisons for those two guys, Draper and Allen?
Well, Draper's spoken before about being kind of looking at the Zach Butters, Chad Warner games and what he can mirror off those guys. Beau Allen may be more of an Elliot Yeo, just given his pretty explosive, pretty powerful, but also can do a lot of work on the defensive end. So if off the top of my head, they're probably the two, I think, across those two guys that you're probably looking at.
Outside of midfielders, one guy that's been spoken about as a potential fit for St Kilda is the key forward in Harry Armstrong. I think Matty Lloyd coached Harry Armstrong and is on record now as saying he's the best key forward that he's coached at that level. Obviously, Lloyd has had a bit to do with Max King and a bunch of other kind of key forwards in the league at the moment. But how have you seen Harry Armstrong, and do you think that he would be someone who fits, I guess, next to Max and some of the younger forwards in that forward line?
Yeah, I think in one of my mock drafts, I might have had him at the Saints' second selection. Again, a local product doesn't hurt when you're picking him out of Sandringham and just taking him down the road to Moorabbin. So, yeah, I think the view of most is that he's probably the best key forward in this year's draft class and probably maybe the best key position player. Alex Taru is probably another one that I think splits some opinions, but by many is another top-rated key position talent. But for Armstrong, tall, good marking, and clean kick, which I think is obviously very important, and an area that the Max has certainly worked on over his time, and obviously Harry's got a little bit to go in perfecting that, but he's certainly starting with a pretty good base level in his goal kicking accuracy.
Before we quickly touch on some of those kids that are tied to the club already, anyone else, I guess, in your list that you think would be a fit or in contention at 7 and 8?
Yeah, I think in my other mock draft, I would have had Toby Travalia heading to the Saints. He would just be like the perfect Ross line player. Just quick, good defensive, off halfback, good mark as well, and some good size on him, but really pacey and a clean mover of the ball. Again, another player who had some state league experience in the VFL with Carlton. The issue obviously around that is, even if he is the best selected, is how will he fit when you've got Nazire and Jack Sinclair? So one of those pushed through the midfields, which could certainly be a benefit, but at the same time, it might be too many of the same type of player. But he can push up on the wing. He can even run through the midfield. So I think he would be a player Ross would love to have, and he's probably could be a good selection for the Saints at pick 8, just depending on who they take with that opening pick.
Now, I guess if you had to, you've done a couple of mock drafts already at zerohanger.com. They're up on YouTube as well. We're 2 days out from the first night of the draft. What's your feeling now as to who's going to be there at the Saints picks available and who you think they take with those 2 picks as of now?
Yeah, I think Smiley is available. I think Richmond's pick 6 might be the biggest danger, but I think, he would be the one that would be up for grabs at pick 7. I think Reid will be available as well, and then Armstrong and Travalia, the other 2 that we've mentioned. I don't think Reid's the second one you take. I think Smiley will be a great one at pick 7, and Travalia will be a nice complementary piece. I don't mind the Armstrong pick either, so if I'm making that selection, I'm probably taking Smiley then Armstrong. If there's an offer from a club like GWS for 15 and 16, or the 2 early selections that they have, I'd probably look at it after taking Smiley. I think that just gives you good access to a draft range where there's a lot of variety. So I think in that kind of 15 to 20 range, There's a good balance of key position players who are up for grabs, half forward threats, midfielders. I think you can, double that pick 8 selection into a couple and get 2 really good kids who might be top 10 picks in, years gone by. So I think be open to the trade. I'm not sure if the Saints will do it, but I think that will certainly be a consideration. But ideally, it's going to reflect off what that first pick is. And I'd like to think if Josh Smiley's on the board, that the Saints will select him.
Beautiful. Now the Saints have committed to listing a player from Sandringham each year. 2 kids that are tied to the club through the academy. Adrian Cole's a pretty well-rated key defender who should be available for us to match a bid on. And Lennox Hoffman as well. What have you seen out of those 2 guys?
Yeah, they're going to be interesting watches across probably night 2 of the draft. And I wouldn't expect first-round bids for them. And I think the Saints will probably hope that they're after that pick 32 selection, I think it is. So if you can get another player in that top 35, that'd be good before forcing to match bids on them. Cole's a really good one-on-one defender. I think if Saints fans haven't been able to look into his game too much and are looking at numbers, I wouldn't stress too much about, maybe some low numbers and how much he's probably not getting the ball. But a lot of the time it's him really just negating his opponent and doing that job on the defensive end. So he's going to be a nice little pickup and probably the first taken out of the players that the Saints are tied to. Lennox Hoffman, I think he's about 190 centimetres, good intercept and good rebounder. So get that kind of medium-sized defender. So when, earlier when we were talking about Toby Travalia, if you're not getting Travalia, you can hope that Hoffman can develop into a similar player who can, be good behind the ball as an aerial threat, but then at the same time when possession switches, he's often running and offering some clean exits out of defensive 50. So it's kind of a nice little 1-2 balance with those 2. And having them in your academies, they're pretty handy get when you've got 2 different types of defenders that you kind of get priority access to.
Now, the Saints haven't had too much luck with father-son picks in the past, but there is one this year with Frankie Peckett's son, Elwood. A little bit tougher to see consistently, having played at a number of different levels. But what do you know of Elwood, and is he someone that Saints fans should expect or could expect to see in the seniors in the coming years?
Yeah, he's certainly going to be a good chance to get picked up. I think with the AFL's draft changes this year, if he's not picked up in the national draft, you guys can just automatically rookie list him. You don't have to wait through the rookie draft and hope that no clubs swooping on him. So that'll be a helpful if, and I'm assuming he isn't picked up in the national intake on Wednesday or Thursday night, and maybe is immediately put onto the list come Friday morning. In saying that, you would think that the Saints make that move, just given the commentary that they've had around lack of access to decent father-son recruits. So when you've got one in your lap, I think there's definitely going to be a play to make sure he's on the list. Had some good glimpses, kind of midfield forward. I think he kicked 5 goals from 25 touches in one game this year, which was certainly a highlight performance for him. So there's some upside there for sure. And at least he's going to be a pretty handy player to have as a depth option, and hopefully he can develop his skills and find his best potential. So it'd be good to have a decent return on a father-son pick, and hopefully he's one that isn't costing the club too much and could be on the rookie list.
Well, Mitch, thanks for joining us on Unpluggered this week. Any final thoughts on the Saints' plans for the draft? No,
I think good position all up. I think you'd be pretty wrapped with having pick 8 as compensation for Josh Battle, or as big of a loss as he is. But I think where the demographic of the list at the moment and kind of building that young core, I think it's going to be a pretty helpful draft, particularly if you get 7, 8, 32 on the board before any further bids come through.
Well, the Saints do head into the draft on Wednesday and Thursday nights with pick 7, 8, 32, 47, 80 and 88. Mitch, good luck for draft nights. All the best, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, mate. All the best for the Saints as well. Hopefully it's a good turnout.